HB Next is the pioneer of compliance as a service, consolidating how industrial companies manage risk and compliance within their organizations, protecting more than 1 million lives, servicing over 5,000 clients, and bringing over 500 years of safety and business continuity domain expertise for our clients. Built as a comprehensive solution, Sequence XT combines people, technology, and processes to create a robust firewall of protection for owners and stakeholders in an easy-to-use platform. Sequence XT and HB Next is your trusted partner in compliance, risk management, safety, and business continuity. HB Next. HB Next is the pioneer of compliance as a service, consolidating how industrial companies manage risk and compliance within their organizations, protecting more than 1 million lives, servicing over 5,000 clients, and bringing over 500 years of safety and business continuity domain expertise for our clients. Built as a comprehensive solution, Sequence XT combines people, technology, and processes to create a robust firewall of protection for owners and stakeholders in an easy-to-use platform. Sequence XT and HB Next is your trusted partner in compliance, risk management, safety, and business continuity. HB Next. HB Next is the pioneer of compliance as a service, consolidating how industrial companies manage risk and compliance within their organizations, protecting more than 1 million lives, servicing over 5,000 clients, and bringing over 500 years of safety and business continuity domain expertise for our clients. Built as a comprehensive solution, Sequence XT combines people, technology, and processes to create a robust firewall of protection for owners and stakeholders in an easy-to-use platform. Sequence XT and HB Next is your trusted partner in compliance, risk management, safety, and business continuity. HB Next.
Hello, drivers of getting things done safely and keeping your organization running smoothly. Welcome to the Drive Podcast, where we navigate topics that matter to you and in the lives of professional transportation, DOT, and fleet. Together, let's navigate the roads that keep you safe, compliant, and your business growing for the future. We're excited to share our first episode of the year, Regulations to Start Your 2025. We have our host, Kevin Colton. Many of you know Kevin, and I'd like to also just reintroduce him and his credentials. Kevin is an expert in transportation, safety, and compliance with a background as a law enforcement officer and a lead police academy instructor. As an FMCSA and DOT authority, he is dedicated to advancing safety in the transportation industry. Kevin is our Director of DOT and Fleet Services at HB Next. He and his team have helped companies develop driver safety onboarding programs, manage driver safety programs, implement successful telematics programs, and guide companies in aftermath of incidents and accidents, and of course, preparing companies for federal and state compliance audits. Kevin's expertise and extended knowledge is why we started the Drive Transportation Podcast, to help the industry, to help you. And as always, there's an interactive session, so please add your questions in the chat. We'll be happy to answer them in the Q&A session at the end. And if you want to reach Kevin after the session, his contact information is already in the chat in the pinned comment. We're also sharing the slides that we're showing today of our deck. If you'd like a copy of our slides, send an email to thedrive@hbnext.com stating, "Give me the slides." That's also in our pinned comment, so please feel free to check that out. And here's your host, Kevin Colton.
All right. Hey, thanks a lot, Garrett, and Happy New Year 2025. It's already gearing up to be a very busy and regulated year, to say the least. Just to recap real quick, we talked about last month. I had Avoiding Detours, Yates Tips for Commercial Auto Insurance. I had special guest was Rachel Tatank and Holly Bourne. We discussed a lot of great information on the insurance. We're going to have some more of that coming up later in the year. Also with some other special guests. We're looking forward to, we're actually going to have an attorney that's going to be on the guest, and he's going to talk about some of these high profile lawsuits that we see with commercial trucking companies, We're going to have a representative from uh, Georgia State Patrol is going to be on one day. We also have another episode, I think, coming up in June, where we're actually going to be talking about the effects of your employees and specifically your drivers, the effects of drugs and how that's looking at. And a little bit later today in this broadcast, we're actually talking about some of the stats I just was able to update late this morning or early this morning. What we ended up on 2023 on the FMCSA drug clearinghouse. And some of the stats even really surprised me in the use of some of illegal drugs that are still going on out there. So let's get into today's episode. What are we going to be talking about? We're really talking about where you should be at closing out 2024 and where we should be starting 2025 on compliance for the company, your drivers, maintenance, everything. And we're going to discuss a few of those points that really have. I see a lot of companies get a little confused. Hey, when do I update my MCS 150, my UCR? If you're in the state of Georgia, your GIMC, or commonly known as your Georgia intrastate motor carrier registration. We're going to talk about the clearinghouse a little bit. Again, like I said, we got some stats I'm going to throw out there, but we're also going to talk about the final rule change that just went in place in November on the status of people that have tested positive and possibly what the prohibited status is. We're going to touch base on your MVRs, when you're supposed to run them, how you should run, and how often should you run them on current employees, your pre-employment, everything. And then last, we're gonna touch base on random drug and alcohol testing for your CDL drivers, and we're gonna tie that in. So if you have a company and you don't necessarily operate under your deal under a DOT number, but you have fleet vehicles. Let's say you just have a bunch of fleet delivery vans, or you're a general contractor and you have a lot of pickups and you don't fall underneath the DOT. We're going to talk a little bit about what's the best way. Hey, Kevin, I don't fall under the DOT FMCSA rules and regulation. How do I work that into my regular fleet? And we'll discuss that a little bit. So let's dive right into this and let's talk about our first topic. And that first topic really is your UCR, or if you're in Georgia, GIMC. So how does that look? Really, it's any company who operates under a DOT number should have completed this by 12/31 of 24. So that portal actually opens up under UCR, opens up October 1st. It did this past year, and it doesn't close, but the filing grace period ends December 31st. So what does that mean? If you forgot to file your UCR, don't panic. Company can still, and you must still complete this as soon as possible. The only issue is now you're going to be forced to pay a slight fine and per driver. So how does the UCR affect you? UCR stands for Unified Carrier Registration, and that information is pulled from your MCS 150 that you initially set up your company or you update every couple of years. It's your operating snapshot in a sense, and it pulls that up based on the amount of equipment that you have, your power units, so to say. It's a fee per vehicles, what you pay. If you're going to pay it now because we failed to pay it within the 2024 calendar year, not a big deal. Just get that paid. If you need any help with that, or if you have questions on that, obviously Garrett will give my information back up at the end of the broadcast. Reach out to me. I'd be more than happy to help you and walk you through. It's relatively easy and you can knock it out in about 10 minutes. So let's talk about what happens. I haven't paid, Kevin. I got drivers out there right now today. What happens if they get stopped and it's actually discovered during a roadside inspection? It's not real typical that a trooper is actually going to do the background check, but it can happen. I've done it in the past in my experience in history when I was out doing roadside inspections, And usually I was looking at the overall carrier snapshot. And if it kind of seemed like a company that had a lot of issues, I would verify things like that. So let's just say you failed to do that. We're not going to get it paid till tomorrow. Your driver gets stopped today. What's going to happen on a roadside inspection? So it's going to come up that the company has not paid their 2025 UCR requirements. So let me tell you exactly what FMCSA says. The FMCSA will stay, you could be fined anywhere from 100 to up to $5,000 for first time offenders. That's going to be based on the court system. It's not going to be any CSA points for the driver. It's really a civil action. Now, how do you know, depending on what state you operate out of, how do you know what state pays and what state does not pay UCR? So there are currently 41 states in the US that are participating in the UCR program. The following states that are not participating are Arizona, Florida, Hawaii, Maryland, Nevada, New Jersey, Oregon, Vermont, Wyoming, and the District of Columbia. So where I'm based out of Georgia, if you cross the state lines, yes, you pay UCR. If you just operate within the state, you pay the GIMC that I'd mentioned earlier. So I work with a lot of companies in Florida who does not have UCR, and they say, oh, good, we don't have to pay that. And that's a yes and no. So one of my companies in Florida actually started doing operations over into Georgia along the coastline, along Savannah, Brunswick, that area. And they got stopped. And they said, hey, you didn't pay UCR. And the company said, well, I don't need to pay UCR because we don't participate in Florida. That's only true if they would have only operated within the boundaries of the state of Florida. As soon as they crossed over into Georgia, then they were required to pay that. So again, if you have any questions on that, really reach out to me. I can help you a little bit more. I think pretty much everybody in the Southeast is very clear on that. It's a one-time fee. You pay it, in that 90-day period from October 1st to December 31st. You pay it, you're done, you get your little receipt online, and then keep that in your company profile. Okay. If you're not sure if somebody paid it from within your office, go into your FMCSA safety portal, put in your DOT number, and you can pull that up and you can see if it's been paid or not. You can also obtain your receipt at that time. All right. So, any questions, contact me after the show today. So, let's get into our second topic. And this is kind of a one that people get a little confused on. And that is our MCS 150. And when should this be updated? What is the MCS 150? The easiest way I like to explain it to people is this is a carrier snapshot of your operations. It says if you're interstate or intrastate, it says if you're interstate in a hazmat carrier, it tells the number of drivers, the number of equipment, it tells the type of product you haul. It tells you a basic snapshot of your overall operation. So the biennial MCS 150 is updated, must be done every 2 years. And we're going to get into this in just a second. And I got a little chart that Garrett's going to throw up for me. And I think it's going to make it really easy to understand. So first, the update is due 2 years after you complete your initial FMCSA registration. That's essentially when you first applied for your DOT number. Then it is updated every 2 years after that. You need to update your MCS 150 with any changes to your business operations or contact information. So let's say you started out and you were operating out of a small facility, and over the course of 2 years, operations have gone good. We've moved to a bigger and better location. My address changed, and I've added 10 extra trucks. This is the time that you would update that MCS 150. That's that snapshot. We would update our address, any operating people, our types of equipment that we don't. Okay. So Again, if you don't make this change, it can be a pretty extensive mistake. One violation could lead up to $10,000 in fines from FMCSA. So there are three ways you can keep your MCS 150 up to date. There's a paper form, and you can get that directly off the links off your FMCSA safety portal when you log in. You can do it in a web form or e-logs by Excel. Again, it's not really hard at all. If you have questions on something like that, feel free to reach out to me or any of my team members here, and we can walk you through that. All right. So let's get into when do I update this, Kevin? It's updated and it goes by the last two numbers of your DOT number. So Garrett has our chart up, and what this looks like is if the next to last digit of your USD OT number is odd, you need to complete your MCS 150 update every odd number year. So we're in 2025. If that second to last number is an odd number, we're going to update it this year. If it was an even number, we should have updated it in 2024. If you did update 2024, we're going to be good to 2026. Okay. So now we know what year we're actually have to update. So what month do I have to do? If you look over here, so now the last number is going to correlate to the number of the month. So as you can see, 1 through 9 is going to start out January, February, March, April, May, June, July, August, September, all the way to the 9th month. October is going to be 0. Okay, Kevin, no. What about November, December? You're gonna keep that as a 0. You're gonna opt to just go ahead and update it at that point. Okay. So it's really pretty easy. You're going to look at your last two numbers of your DOT number. The second to the last is going to be the year you update. The last number will correlate to the month. And I've displayed a little chart like that. Like Garrett said, reach out to us. We can give you a copy of that. You can pull this information directly off your FMCSA safety portal also if you need help. So that's the big one on that. So let's get going. Let's talk about a little bit on our third topic, which is the clearinghouse. And this is there's quite a bit of information in here that I want to talk about. So now that 2024 is passed, you should have ran a limited query on all active drivers that were hired before 24. Okay. What does that mean? We hired them in 2023. We ran a pre-employment or a full query through FMCSA Drug Clearinghouse. We got the results back. He was good. He wasn't prohibited status or anything. They drove. Now in 2024, you were required to run what they call a limited query. A limited query is a little bit different than the full and the pre-employment query. The first thing we needed to do on the limited query is make sure your driver has acknowledged and you have a signed statement that the driver understands that operating a CDL, that he falls under FMCSA regulations and requirements, and that a limited query will be ran on him each calendar year that he is employed with your company. Just have him sign a little sheet that states that, put the dates on that. FMCSA has actually said that you can date that sheet from the date of issuance. So he signed it in 2023 and you can date it. It will not expire until 3 years post date on that. Okay. So that's nice and easy. You can make those forms up. There's examples on FMCSA. I have them here within my team that I can help you with. Those are super easy. Okay. So we run a limited query. What's the difference between a limited query and a full pre-employment query? Remember, a pre-employment full query requests information through the clearinghouse and it has to be approved by the driver electronically. That means when the driver registered themselves in the clearinghouse, They set up their name, they put in their driver's license number, their date of birth and everything, and they had to do a two-step authentication. That was through login.gov, their email, their cell phone. That means anytime they go to log in, same thing as you as an employer or an SAP, we had to do the two-step authentication. When you ran them on the full or the pre-employment, electronic message would go to their email and say, on behalf of company ABC, they're trying to conduct a pre-employment full query. Do you accept? The driver had to accept, and then you immediately got the results back through the clearinghouse. We only have to do that one time. Moving forward, when we run a limited query, we will automatically get those results back. Nothing goes to the driver. We don't have to wait for the driver to respond on that. So that's the nice part about that. So limited queries, you're responsible to run once a calendar year, and you do not have to document that in a driver's DQ file. Geez, Kevin, why don't I have to document that? Because everything else has to go in the DQ file, MVRs, medical card license. The reason being is because that is ran directly through the FMCSA Drug Clearinghouse portal. Administrative and law enforcement are able to log into that portal under your company name, and they can see everybody that's ran. So it's essentially, it's already stored electronically, and the enforcement agency, so to say, will be able to see those drivers that were ran. Okay, so now we run them on a limited query. We have their release form. We're good to go. Just make sure you've updated that a little bit. A little bit of full query allows employer to see the detailed information about any drug and alcohol program violations in the driver clearinghouse record. An employer must obtain the driver's electronic consent. We talked about that. So let's get into some interesting facts that the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration, or commonly known as FMCSA, has actually released. Now, I just got another update this morning, and this was as of 12/1/24. So essentially, we're missing just December, but this is all the stats from the clearinghouse from the inception of it, clear up to December 4th of this year. And some interesting facts on that. To date, we have had over 270,000 drivers that tested positive. But on 2024, just on marijuana alone, we had over 32,000 drivers actually test, and they tested positive. Now, here's something that's interesting. In 2024, November, 2,072 had tested positive. 180,110 drivers were still prohibited from driving. That means essentially their license was suspended. Hence, we go into 12/1, the reporting was 276,026 drivers had tested. 180,000 of them are still prohibited. So I caution you, and why do I bring these numbers up? There's 180,000 plus CDL drivers that at one point had a CDL license and most likely were working somewhere. They tested positive for some sort of substance, and their CDL was temporarily suspended. What happened November, the final rule came in through FMCSA, and that final rule actually requires each state to then make it the CDL is suspended, a learner's permit cannot move any further, their status is essentially on hold, and it will be reported that way on their MVR. So if you're a company, even if you're a small company, and you only have 2 or 3, and if you're not an active participant in the clearinghouse, which you should be, please reach out for any help that you may need on that. Be mindful of that. My team can help you really relatively easy. It's quick. We can get you signed up in a day. Be careful. There are a lot of companies out there that will do that, but they'll charge you some really high fees on that. Reach out to us. We can talk about that. The other one is I pulled this up in a 1 month period on the clearinghouse. There was over 3,966 drivers that tested positive just on, the narcotics. The major one is going in on marijuana, which is about 50% or 57% of all reported violations. And then it drops down to cocaine with methamphetamine. So, who are our biggest states that are having those registered drivers? It is California, Texas, Florida, in my state of Georgia. We came in number 4 with the most people reported out of all 50 states, Canada, and Mexico. So we're going to get into drug testing in a little bit here in a few minutes. Big things I want to take out of this is make sure you're always doing a full pre-employment query on Drug Clearinghouse at the time of pre-hire, and then you're doing it annually each year on a limited query after that. Okay. If your driver's not registered in the clearinghouse, they cannot drive. You can hire them, but they can't drive in a commercial status. Okay. So I hope that information has kind of helped you a little bit. There's a lot of guys still out there. You owe it to yourself. You don't want to put a driver out there on the road who has not been verified. There's a lot of potential and a lot of risk to your company. And the bottom line is we don't want anybody behind the wheel of a commercial vehicle that shouldn't be. Okay. All right. Now, let's get into kind of our fourth topic, and that's MVR, our motor vehicle records. So, your DQ requirements, if you have a CDL driver, you operate under the DOT number. Motor carriers must conduct an MVR check on each new driver hired, which covers the previous 3 years. So we're bringing a person in, they put in the application, we think we're going to move forward with them. Make sure you run an MVR back for at least 3 years. Now, kind of like the clearinghouse, we run that at the time of pre-hire. We hired him in 2023. We moved up to 2024. He's still employed with us, or she's still employed with us. You must now run that again for the 2024 calendar year. Again, you're only required to run a 3-year MVR, but you want to go through that. And let me just say that you should have a well-written, documented driver safety policy that says to all drivers that they sign in receipt for that they know that if they receive a ticket involved in an accident, whether it's on duty or off duty, they have to disclose it to the company because that can affect them. When you run their MVR, look for any discrepancies in that MVR that may show, hey, Joe got a speeding ticket back in July of 2024 for 86 miles an hour in a 55. Holy cow, Joe, what happened? You didn't tell us. So make sure your employee driver safety manual outlines the steps on that, discipline, everything else. There are a lot of insurance companies, like we talked with Rachel and Holly last month, that there can be some disqualifying violations that a driver had. And what we actually see is a driver knows he's going to get in trouble. In some cases, he may even believe that he's going to be terminated. What is he going to do? I've seen drivers actually not report it. We discovered it in MVR, brought him in, said, hey, you didn't tell us that you had a DUI, a reckless driving, or something to that effect, a serious moving violation. And they simply said, yeah, I knew I was going to lose my job, and I wanted to write it out as long as I could until I got caught. So that kind of brings me up to another little question on MVRs where we say, hey, you only need to run it once a year. Should you run an MVR on your drivers more than once a year? That's really a loaded question. It's open. Only you know how your employees are. You know how your drivers are driving, what type of driver they are. Can you run it more than once? Maybe you want to run it every 6 months or run it once a quarter. You could. I would say if you have a lot of drivers and you want to run it once every 6 months, there's no harm in that. There are companies out there that will do an MVR monitoring. What does that say? They constantly monitor your drivers, and whenever a violation pops up on their MVR, they notify you. The only thing, I'm not saying that's a bad thing. The only thing I want to say is they will not see that MVR, a violation pop up on the MVR until after that driver's been completely convicted of it and it goes back to the Department of Motor Driver Services. Make sense? So if he gets a speeding ticket today, he could ride that out for at least another 2 or 3 months before it would possibly ever show up in the MVR. Have good discussions with your drivers, have that culture set within your organization that they feel that, hey, I can come to you. Hey, I kind of screwed up. I got a speeding ticket this weekend. Okay, well, what happened? We worked through it and we have that relationship with the driver. Look at those. So run the MBR. You only have to run it every once a year or at the time of pre-employment. Place that into the driver qualification file. Um, Medical cards, the last thing, when a lot of the states, when you run their MVR, you will see that their medical card is married up with that. There's a lot of great information in your MVR when you look at that. What I like to do is verify that their medical card is in good status. I want to check the expiration on the medical card. And then I want to look at the medical examiner that issued the card. Why is that important? Because FMCSA says when you have a driver, you must verify the medical examiner in the National Registry. That is super easy. You go under the National Registry, you put in the doctor or the examiner's name, and you put in their certification number, and it will tell you exactly, hey, they're in good status. I put out a bulletin at the beginning of 2024 that it actually showed there was I believe it, I know it was over 75,000 medical examiners countrywide that actually had their examination status suspended for whatever reason. They were no longer practicing, whatever it was. So make sure you check their MVR, check the medical card to make sure it's in good standing, make sure the two are married up, and then last but least, make sure you verify the examiner on the National Registry. Again, if you need any help with that, because hey, you're just so busy, Kevin, how can I do that? Reach out to me and my team. We can knock that out. I can walk you through the steps, and it's simple, easy peasy. Okay. All right. So we've kind of talked about that on everything that's going into your DQ file. So let's kind of get into our last topic, and that is talking about random drug and alcohol testing for your CDL drivers. And I'm going to touch base also at the end on not just the random stuff, but we'll also, Garrett's got he's got a good little chart for me that he's going to put up on when do we have to test if my driver's involved in an accident? And we'll talk about that. So, random. You obviously, on all CDL drivers, must test pre-employment. That means you must send them over for a pre-employment drug test. They'll do the urine. They'll check everything. They'll make sure he's good, and they'll give you the status. On a side note, don't forget you also run them in the clearinghouse to make sure they're not prohibited on anything. So once you do that, after that, your driver pool. Let's say you have 200 CDL drivers within your company. There's two different things you can do. One is you can belong to a consortium. That means you give your active driver list, you belong to either a medical group or a third party that puts all of your CDL drivers essentially into a big pool. And every month and every quarter, they will draw names out of the hat. Now, there could be 3,000 names in that hat. Maybe some of your guys get pulled. You don't know. It's essentially like a lottery. Okay. If you do not belong to a consortium, this is important for your company. Make sure you have an active driver CDL list. That's all of my drivers that currently have a CDL and are in good standing and actively employed with my company. FMCSA says you will test randomly 50% of those drivers for drugs and 10% of those drivers for alcohol in that calendar year. You break that down per quarter, percentage wise. If we have 200, we're going to have to test 100 of them on drugs throughout the year, 25, 25, 25. I would suggest, and this is me, and you can do the 10% as long as you can keep track of it the right way. 10% of them, anytime I send a driver over for a random test on drugs, I just have them go ahead and do the alcohol. One, that means your company is going above and beyond the requirements and the guidelines. Makes us look even better because we're doing everything right. And, document that. We'll send them over. Remember, anytime you send a driver over for drug and alcohol random tests, they must immediately go when you tell them. You need to document the time that, hey, I called Joe in at 8 o'clock this morning. He needs to go right over to Concentra or a hospital system or wherever you do your testing, LabCorp, whatever that may be. If there is a delay, he doesn't show up and he doesn't check in till 10 o'clock. But the facility is only 30 minutes away. You need to have a quick discussion with them because that can go down as a refusal because it's possible he didn't go there, he did something, and he can be in trouble for that. So make sure everything's documented. Do you have to go with that driver over to the testing? Not necessarily, but if you do have a member of your management team go over and document that. What does that also mean? It means we went above and beyond our regulations, okay? So we've talked about the random. Make sure they are aware and they should sign off at pre-employment when they get a copy of your driver safety policy. They should also sign off on the clearinghouse. They should sign off on MVRs, able to run the MVRs, and they should also sign off on knowing what the drug policy is, that they fall under FMCSA, alcohol and drugs, and what that really entails. Okay. So they go over, they sign it, and they have a copy of that. If you update your policy at any point throughout the year or at the beginning of the year, which you should be doing in 2025, make sure they get a revised copy of that and they sign off on that. Okay. It's really easy. Again, and I know I keep stating this on each one of these sections, but if you have any question how that looks like, reach out to us. If you, in the state of Georgia, we have a drug-free workplace that's for all employees, and it can be tied into the DOT section. And a side note on that, you say, Kevin, I don't operate under the DOT number. Can you talk to any of us that have fleet vehicles? I want to know what I should do on my policy. You can adapt that policy for the same people. You can make that drug policy whatever you need to be. That, hey, you drive a pickup, you don't fall under the DOT guidelines, but you're still falling under random drugs. You can't use them during work. You can't bring them to work. You have to submit to testing. So, all right, now let's get into our last chart. Our last chart is really this flow chart that explains what happens if you're in an accident. So Garrett has that up there. So did an accident involve a commercial motor vehicle? I made this really as simple as I could. So we're going to say yes, my driver was driving a dump truck. The answer is yes. You go to the left right there. Did the accident occur on a public roadway? We're going to say no. Didn't occur on a public roadway. Under DOT, no test is required. That could be different if your policy simply says, your driver policy simply says, anytime you have a workman's comp or a accident, you're going to get drug tested, which is very common. Again, what does that mean? We went above and beyond what regulations say. But if the accident did occur on a public roadway and it answered yes, now you ask the next question. Was it necessary for any vehicle involved in the accident to be towed from the scene? When it is towed from the scene, that is disabling damage that is actually towed when law enforcement is there. If the driver says, no, I can drive my car home, I'm good to go, and he goes down the road and then it conks out on him, that doesn't count. It's disabling damage when it's at the scene. Law enforcement calls for a record on any of that. You say, okay, he had some disabling damage. We had to call for a tow truck. So that response to that one is yes. Follow your chart. Was the your employee, cited for a moving traffic violation? If he was not, no test is required. If the two vehicles made contact, the vehicle has to be towed, and our driver received a ticket at the scene, then a test is required. Now, what about if somebody is injured? So again, was it necessary for the vehicles involved in the accident be towed? And then we said no. But did any person involved in the accident require immediate medical treatment away from the scene of the accident? That means they got transported. If they say, well, my neck and back hurts and I'm going to drive up there by myself, well, that does not count. It means EMS was called to the scene and they're going to transport that person to the hospital. EMS is going to transport them. We answered yes. Was the employee cited for that traffic violation? Yes. Then the testing is required. Okay. There's two things I want to add to this on the drug testing. It's very common. It's a little bit of a fender bender, but vehicles are going to be towed away. By the time law enforcement gets done with that report, the time that it was called in, by the time they responded, and by the time they get out there, complete the report, and they actually finish with your driver to release them, we could have some delay in time because you have to test alcohol within 8 hours, 2 to 8 hours, and you must test drugs within 32 hours. I always suggest for a company, if you're involved in an accident with a commercial motor vehicle and your driver is going to be drug tested, please try to get a supervisor, a management, somebody of that nature to accompany your driver so we can have that well documented, because what typically is going to happen if an accident occurs with a private motor vehicle and our commercial vehicle, what results after that within just a few days in some cases? Hey, I want to talk to an attorney. So we just want everything all really documented. So let's kind of recap and in closing on what we talked about today. We talked about UCR and GIMC if you operate here in Georgia. When update your MCS 150, what that actually involves, how you do that. FMCSA Drug Clearinghouse. We talked about your full and pre-employment queries. We've talked about your limited query that you should conduct for each calendar year. We should have had that done, completed for 2024. We're good to go really to that last quarter of 2025, okay? And then we talked about MVRs and the records. Remember, run a 3-year MVR on any new hire and then run it again once a year and put that all in your DQ file. Also, good information is on that MVR. Check their medical card. Make sure you're checking your medical examiner on the National Registry. A lot of great information on that. Okay. And last but least, we just finished talking about random drug testing, drugs and alcohol, what that consists of. Remember, 50% on drugs, 10% on alcohol for your company. If you have any questions on that or you need help monitoring any of the stuff, reach out to us and let us know. My team would be more than willing to help you out on that and just answer questions. It's free to give me a call. So in closing, let's now kind of turn this back over to Garrett. Garrett, we put a lot of information out there. What do we got? Did anybody have any questions or anything for me?
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, so normally we have some pre-submitted questions. We normally just go over those now, and then if anyone said anything in the chat, we'd hit those. but we actually have some chat questions already came in. I want to go over those first, okay? So the first question that came through was, what if a company is lucky and has escaped getting caught not paying their UCR or GIMC for the previous year? They owe for 2024 and 2025.
Okay, so when you go into the system to pay, if you did not pay for the previous year or you just didn't pay for several years and you say, oh, Kevin brought this up, I need to pay, you go into the system, it will only let you pay your backdated years first. So I would have to pay 23, 24, and then I'd be in good standing until 2025 comes up this year. Like I said in the beginning, there's a bit of a small fine associated per power unit, and you just pay that and you're good to go. The biggest thing is pay your fee so your driver doesn't get caught and you don't draw attention overall to your company, which could trigger a compliance audit. Good question.
Awesome. And I actually had the same user submitted another question. And I'd like to hit this as well. This is about driver's licenses. So the question states, should a company remove a driver with an out-of-state CDL from active status if that driver has failed to obtain the Georgia CDL after 30 days of becoming a Georgia resident?
Got it. So the way that law in every state's a little bit different, but let me just speak on Georgia right now. If you become a new resident in the state of Georgia, you have 30 days to obtain a Georgia driver's license. Okay. And I get it. You're just moved. There's a lot of things going on. You got to have like 2 copies of proof of residency. You can get that lease agreement, your phone bill, cell phone. You can change it. You get that in. What happens if they're pulled over and they still have a out-of-state license and they say, well, I've been living in Georgia for 6 months. I didn't do it. They're going to receive a citation, possibly lead to a roadside inspection. And it could cost them some CSA points. Should you remove them from operation? I would say that's going to be based on your company and your company policy. Those are discussions that you should also have with all of your new employees whenever they come in. If he presents a out-of-state license, you need to say, hey, you got to get this license in 30 days. Your safety team or your HR should be following up with that driver. Put a little reminder in there. Hey, man, did you get your license? We talked to you at pre-employment. This could affect your ability to drive. It's going to be based on company policy.
Awesome. That was a great question. So let's go into some of the pre-submitted ones. We have a couple more minutes. So one of the pre-submitted questions I have here, I think it's a pretty good one, is can I use the same guidelines for my fleet drivers that FMCSA recommends?
You can't. You just clearly want to state, and where we commonly see that is MBR reporting tickets, in your drug testing policy. Absolutely. You can make that drug testing policy and say, I always try to have them. I want to hold any driver responsible the equal no matter what the vehicle is. And what's very common is go above and beyond. If you're involved in a motor vehicle accident, whether you're at fault or not at fault, if you're driving a pickup truck all the way to a tractor trailer, my policy is you're going to go get randomly tested. What is the bottom line on that? I don't want any unsafe drivers operating my vehicle because it jeopardizes not only their safety and everybody out on the road, but it also jeopardizes my company as a whole. But yes, you can adapt those. It should be kind of technical. We should have it well written, well explained. Reach out to us. We have great experts here within HB Next that can help you write any safety or driver policy you have questions on.
Let's move to our last question. Great answer, by the way. I do want to highlight what you just said, which is you don't want any unsafe drivers, right? That's just something you don't want is unsafe drivers. And I think in the next area for this question, this is something that you don't want any ambiguity on. The question basically asks, if a driver tests positive for drugs or alcohol, do I have to report it? I'm confused. Like we should have very clear, right, what we should be doing here. So let's bring some clarity to this before we get out of here.
Got it. So what they're saying, a driver tests positive. What is the responsibility of an employer operating under a DOT number? There's a couple different things. Remember, if I told you most times your driver's going to be sent to a facility. That facility is required under FMCSA, the federal side of rules and guidelines, that they turn him in to the clearinghouse. You'll get a notice that he tested positive. You do not have to do anything in the clearinghouse on reporting. On the flip side, if you in-house test, that means you conduct your own possible urine. It's coming up this next year, oral swabs, any of that. You do a BAT for alcohol and the driver test positive. You must record those results and turn that into the clearinghouse. There are step-by-step instructions on how to do that. It's not very common for a company to have to report a driver that tests positive either for drugs or alcohol. I would really suggest reach out to me. I'll walk you through those steps because you need to be careful on that.
That's
Good
awesome.
question, though.
That's awesome. And, just for brevity's sake, and the last thing, what if you don't have time for any of this? What if this is just too overwhelming for you to handle? What's the best way to manage everything?
Great question. There are a lot of people out there, a lot of companies out there, third-party companies that will help a company operating under a DOT number or a fleet company keep up with all these regulations, violations. How do I report? Where do I keep it at? What's the timeline for that? When do I pay this? That type of thing. You're too busy with your day-to-day operations. And I get it. Make sure you owe it to yourself to do your research on who you want to help you. A lot of companies out there, look at their background, look at the team, look at who you're going to get corresponding with you and helping you with that. And look and see, instead of paying 6 different people, one to do your UCR, one to do your clearinghouse, one to run your MVRs, one to do training, one to help you in accident investigations, I would say really look at a company that can provide all that under one umbrella, if that makes sense. At HB Next, we do that. Part of my team, one of my other team members, he has over 36 years of law enforcement. We've been doing this for over 6 years. We built up a great reputation. And I would say before you pick anybody, if you're comfortable with one, reach out to another one, get that second opinion, see what they offer, see what the cost is. Hey, do you guys also provide training? Do you have software? Can you help us in an accident investigation? Can you help me with updates? Can you help me with a drug consortium? If you said yes on all those, you're probably talking to me right here, and we're going to have a great partnership coming up in the next year. But always feel free to come and ask me. Like I said, there's a lot of companies out there that do that. Just you owe it to yourself to be the cost in doing all that and what you get for your money. Okay.
That's
Good
awesome.
question.
Thank you, Kevin, so much for all your candidness and honestly just phenomenal expert-driven answers. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
So that's going to be all the time we have for our questions from our listeners today. Thank you, everyone, for listening. We really do appreciate you. We're not here without you guys, so thank you so much. Kevin is available to follow up questions after the podcast at kcolton@hbnext.com. Again, that's kcolton@hbnext.com. That email address is in the pinned comment in the chat. If you want a copy of the slides today, please send us an email to thedrive@hbnext.com stating, "Give me the slides." It's also pinned in the chat. You can't miss it. Give me the slides if you want to take a more detailed approach or look at what we went over today. The recorded session and future topics will be found at hbnext.com/podcast. And you can also be found on Spotify and YouTube. The live streams can always be found on our YouTube channel at HBNext Corp. Our next podcast episode is Wednesday, February 12th, 2025 at 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. The episode discusses driver safety, the HR and transportation partnership with human resources guest Kevin Madison. If you found today's discussion helpful, please share this and subscribe to our YouTube channel at HBNext Corp. Leave us a review. Join our conversation on social media at HBNext using the hashtags TheDrive and hashtag HBNextTheDrive. If you have any questions, topics, concerns, or things you want us to cover in future episodes, feel free to reach out to us at thedrive@hbnext.com. Until next time, stay safe and keep driving towards a better future. And Happy New Year to everyone. Bye, everyone.
Great. Thank you.
The Drive Podcast.